Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Fernanda Gebara, and I'm going to present our work I've been doing with Joana Castro Pereira on the reciprocities and conflicts between material and symbolic worlds when perceiving the Amazon in the Anthropocene. Our work seeks to respond to recent critical work on the Anthropocene by investigating reciprocities and conflicts between material and symbolic worlds in the face of potential environmental catastrophic risk. We approach the Amazon basin as a site where nature, culture, resource extraction, and spirituality are enmeshed. We ask questions related to the significant contemporary cultural as well as individual variation in the ways people relate with each other and with nature that are mediated, negotiated, and managed through diverse materials, symbols, knowledges, values, and practices. Since the early 2000s, the Anthropocene, the concept that the Earth has moved into a geological epoch that acknowledges human domination of the planetary system, has been increasingly debated by scientists and non-academics. The concept calls for new perspectives on how to live and how to respond to the challenges of a human-dominated planet. Key topics in the Anthropocene debate includes its starting date, the nature of the change, the interactions between humans and other than human beings, and the current or imminent shift of planetary functioning. Other names have been given to such an epoch, such as Capitalocene, that locates the origin of the crisis in the capitalism's exploitative relations to labor, food, energy, and raw materials, the so-called cheap natures. Plantationocene and Homogenocene, which are subcategories of the Capitalocene, and they highlight the plantation system, monocultures, and mass extinctions. Gynocene, that acknowledges the patriarchal domination of the planet. Technocene, highlighting the whole of technology as the real subject of our times. And finally, Cthulhucene, which tries to avoid the human-centered approach, arguing that it's not just about humans alone, but also about all other interactions with other species as well. And this new epoch, no matter the name, calls for our ability to imagine multiple alternatives and devise unconventional strategies. And in our view, this requires cross-cultural and cross-disciplinary exchanges. The Anthropocene may also be perceived as a consequence of the predominance of the material world over the symbolic world. There is no clear conception of the material world. Materials are anything made of matter. And for our purposes, we are interested in the materials that have been manipulated and transformed by humans since Stone Age. Such materials are a prominent part of our lives due to the flow of resources from south to north and the increase in consumption. The symbolic world, on the other hand, signifies the way of thinking of individuals in different cultures and the representation of their values. Anything we do depends on culture, such as eating habits, learning methods, and others. And culture is the way that non-material objects, such as symbols, language, values, come together with material objects to form attitudes and ways of living. The realm of things then can be seen as the material world, and the realm of ideas could represent the symbolic world, the intangible creations of humans' societies. Red, for example, is a symbol for stop in many cultures, and these shared meanings, they happen through a process called cultural transmission, which uses different types of language and its main tool. The particular meanings one attributes to things influences the way one thinks about reality. At the same time, how we perceive things in terms of wrong and right, meaning our values, also serve as guidelines on how to live. There are many ways of seeing the Amazon in the Anthropocene. Some still see it as the lungs of the world, which we all know it's not. Others as a carbon sink, and others as a development frontier. Considering the fire events that happened in 2019 in different Amazonian countries, it is fair to say that the forest is still predominantly seen as a source of different commodities. We then want to look at two main ways of perceiving the Amazon in such a context: a provider of resources that constitutes many of the materials we use in our modern society, but also the home of different symbolic plants and other than human beings. We then ask, what does the Amazon mean? And how could we attribute more symbolic than material meanings to the forest? And the contemplation of these difficult questions called to our mind a fragment from the diaries of Henri David Thoreau, who saw nature as a form of prayer and who asked, what would human life be without forests? So, examples of symbolic ways of seeing the Amazon and its natural resources include the meanings attributed to trees and rivers by different indigenous peoples. The Samauma, for example, the Ceiba Petranda, has different names depending on the indigenous group, such as the Queen of the Forest, the Mother of Humanity, the Tree of Life, the Stairs to the Sky, and it is also one of the largest trees in the world, and in modern times it has also been called the Forest GPS, as it is used as guidance for navigation and for communication. Rivers are also very symbolic to indigenous peoples. Some of them see them as the arteries of the earth, and others as the source of life. The anaconda is another important symbol. She represents the first animal of the earth, and as such is respected for its ancient knowledge about the earth. Different indigenous peoples lament the fact that these majestic trees and enchanted animals and elements, each endowed with living spirit, are vanishing because humans have failed to see their true value. They have been continually protesting to call attention for that. So how to change it? How could we use the Anthropocene as an opportunity to change the way the Amazon is predominantly being perceived? First, we need to acknowledge our failures, and we build on Nobri and Nobri work and call this the conflict of the material and symbolic worlds. And they are conceptual failures, meaning imagination challenges, such as the vision of the Amazon as only a source of commodities, and the lack of imagination to create alternative, less socially and environmentally damaging pathways based on the forest's natural resources, such as its rich biodiversity. Knowledge failures, meaning research and information challenges, such as the difficulties in integrating indigenous knowledge to other knowledge systems, reduced amount of funding to research about different biological resources that only indigenous peoples are aware of, and implementation failures, meaning governance and policy challenges and entrepreneurial capacity as well, such as the failure of Amazonian countries' government to recognize the risk of current and past development policies and the inefficient implementation of technology innovations. Then we need to address such failures and focus on the solutions. Unfortunately, we may not have a long window of time to change course with respect to sustainable pathways for the Amazon, as there is a great chance we are reaching its turning point. So, what are the reciprocities of material and symbolic worlds? Few of the biological values of Amazonian biodiversity are known by Western science. Others are being still researched. A good example is the acai fruit of the Interpe or Oleracea palm, widely and historically consumed only by local populations until the 90s. From then on, it gained the world for its nutritional and functional qualities, even with the operational difficulties for trading it, and including in Europe, United States, and Japan. And its botanical genus, Interper, bears the name of one of the nine muses of Greek mythology, daughter of Zeus, who represents pleasure and happiness, as many consumers of acai pulp may well attest. Acai has other uses far beyond food in the cosmetic sectors to also to treat cancerous lesions, and a natural plastic was also developed from acai seeds recently. There are many other examples, as research in the medical field confirms, and the value of many indigenous traditional medicines are being more and more recognized, and together with the advanced research methods applied to identify them. So, the existing knowledge of natural resources is an initial condition of the Amazonian system. It does not depend on any human technology. Indigenous peoples are probably the only ones that recognize and know how to identify such natural knowledge. Ancient and traditional knowledge come greatly from observing and interacting with the natural elements, which they have been doing since a long time ago. And such interaction is mainly framed by animistic relations with other than human beings. And they have been studying, as they themselves call it, the plant and animal worlds for centuries. They say we should learn how to listen to plants and animals, and that they speak in a language that we can't directly perceive or comprehend when not immersed in nature. They talk about plant consciousness, what some may refer to as plant intelligence. And they go through different plant and animal diets to understand what they have to tell them. Most of the knowledge about the natural environment come from such studies, but their ability for learning from nature and the capacity of applying such knowledge to build solution is being threatened by some of the negative consequences of the Anthropocene. Indigenous culture transmission happens from elders to youth orally, and different than the Western culture, there are no books, and elders are dying, and the youth are losing interest on ancient knowledge more and more. Hopefully, there is a growing body of research on the intelligence and teaching of different plants. Plants dominate every terrestrial environment, composing 99% of the biomass on Earth, and they are here much earlier than us and probably know much better about our Earth system. By comparison, humans and all the other animals are, in the words of plant neurobiologists, just traces. Some even believe that we will just be able to change our behavior in the direction needed to shift and overcome catastrophic environmental risks with the help of plants. But this is a topic for another paper and presentation. Going back to our research, we all know that Western understanding of the Amazon has been dominated by the study of how the forest could better serve us, emphasizing human domination of the natural world. We need to start finding ways in which we can also serve the forest. So going back to your question, if we were to vanish tomorrow, the plants would be probably fine. The fact that if the plants vanished, we would not thrive and we would not be fine should remind us of our dependence on them and should cultivate a contempt for their value and our weakness. In terms of moving forward, there is an urgent need for a conceptual, educational, institutional, and entrepreneurial revolution. A revolution based on knowledge, both traditional and scientific. It is important to build elaborated systems of reciprocity to support relationships between different cultures and the co sharing of their knowledge to build creative solutions. We may well ask how to promote cycles of reciprocity between human and non human beings. We have been cooperating with other species, and as human, we have only thrived because of such cooperation. It is time to remind ourselves of such an important value. Indigenous knowledge and Western science are both powerful ways of knowing, and that by using them together, we can imagine a more just and joyful relationship with the earth. So we'll finish with a story, with a myth about the acai, and as it is definitely a great example of the many possibilities of combining local knowledge with modern technological tools and cutting edge research in reciprocal ways. This myth tells that a long time ago, at some point, food was insufficient and it was very difficult to get food for all the Indians of a tribe. So the chief of the tribe made a very cruel decision. He resolved that from that day on, all children who were born would be sacrificed to avoid the population increase in his tribe. Until one day the chief's daughter, called Iansan, gave birth to a beautiful girl who also had to be sacrificed. Yansan was desperate. She cried every night to miss her little daughter. She stayed in her oka for several days and asked Tupã, indigenous god, to show her father another way to help her people without the sacrifice of children. On a full moon, Yansan heard a child's cry. She approached the door in her oka and saw her beautiful smiling daughter at the foot of a palm tree. Initially, she stood still, but soon after she launched herself towards her daughter, embracing her. However, her daughter mysteriously disappeared. Yansan, inconsolable, cried a lot until she fainted. The next day, her body was found embraced by the trunk of the palm tree, but on her face there was a happy smile, and her black eyes looked at the top of the palm tree, which was laden with dark berries. Her father, the chief, then ordered the men of the tribe to pick the fruits. They obtained a reddish juice that he named acai, Yansan, reversed, in honor of his daughter. He fed his people and from that day on suspended his order to sacrifice children. I truly hope we keep searching for this type of acai vision so we don't need to sacrifice our children and let's say our own species. Thank you very much.